51 years ago, Richard Nixon took us off of the gold standard.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets. We will press for the necessary reforms to set up an urgently needed new international monetary system.
There's an incredible website. If you haven't seen it, it's WTF happened in 1971. A lot of things started to decline for the United States. This is a dark and important birthday, so to speak, that I think gives us an opportunity to reflect on how important having sound money is, especially in this day and age when we start to see inflation ballooning very, very rapidly. Do not believe the inflation is good narratives that, have been going on forever and certainly ramped up into a fever pitch when we went off the gold standard or in the last pieces that were dismantled by Nixon. But we're now seeing it more and more and more. Don't believe it. Invest in Bitcoin, understand how Bitcoin works, and take control of your own financial future.
So I did some digging. So this kind of was like the unravel of the USD being backed by gold. So back in July of 1971, that exact year, France actually had a bunch of IMF loans that were coming due, and with the US being one of the largest holders of gold after World War II, in order to send the gold to the US, and we would hold it in protection of the Germans raiding all of these other nations in Europe. So they sent a warship or a battleship to the East Coast in order of the United States in order to claim $191 million in gold required to pay the IMF fund back for the loan that they took out. The US was kind of a little panicked because we had to come up with all this gold as we had been not debasing the currency, but we've been changing the money multiplier, which basically means that they were changing the amount of gold that you would get back per US dollar equated to it. So even though we were still on a gold standard, they were debasing it like, oh, if $20 gets you 1 ounce, it actually requires $30 to get you 1 troy ounce. At the time of this happening, it was actually $35, like I said, for 1 troy ounce of gold. So they were buying $191 million of gold in order to do the payment back to the IMF. The UK was getting nervous, like, oh, what if the US doesn't have enough gold to back all of the paper claims that they had sent out? So at this time, the Prime Minister of the UK called up Nixon and said, hey, we want all of the gold transferred to Fort Knox in New York, and we're going to be sending a ship in the next 2 weeks in order to pick up our payment of gold. So they see France taking their payment of gold. The UK wanted their payment of gold. And it was at this time that Nixon locked himself in a room with a bunch of bankers and said, we need to do something in order to not have the Bretton Woods systems unravel. At this time, the infamous speech on August 15th, 1971, that Nixon went on TV and said,
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
Obviously, this is a temporary measure, and the famous saying goes, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government mandate. So to this day, 51 years later, the US dollar is not redeemable for gold in its own currency.